We are back, everyone, and we are so excited to have Dave Mowry with us today. He has two mental health books and does stand up to deal with mental illness. And I'm going to let you tell everybody about that. Laura
Well,
and I are huge fans of stand-up comedy, and I think from our experience, Laura, you tell me what you think. Most comedians seem to have some battles that they deal with.
absolutely. I think a lot of art, not just comedy, is born from pain. And I think it's a beautiful way of, finding expression. And, when you're going through hard times, there have been many moments where I've been like, getting upset about this is just going to make it harder. So I may as well have some fun with it and laugh with it. So I love when you can bring lightness and humor into really scary and hard things. And I mean, obviously, we have a very shared, strong history. I mean, who doesn't like laughing? But I'm very interested because you do have books. You've obviously dealt with this firsthand. And I'm curious kind of how you found yourself walking this path as the way you found most supportive to deal with some of your challenges.
I live with bipolar disorder and anxiety and PTSD. Have for all my adult life, was successful in business, and then had a breakdown, lost it all, hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, homeless with family for 18 months. And just, I call them my 10 years were my lost years, my dark days, where just I could barely function. And then I went to a NAMI meeting, National Alliance on Mental Illness. They've got local affiliates, and I went to one of their meetings. My wife encouraged me to do it. And it was just a place where, I could just be and not pretend. And I just sat back in the corner and just sat there by myself and listened. And that was kind of the beginning of recovery. And then um, I ended up working with them, volunteer and then part-time, a few hours a week. And they had a comic come in. He teaches stand-up comedy to folks with a mental illness. And he came in and to teach a comedy class. And I thought, I can do that. And I don't know why I thought I could do that, but I thought I could do that. And so I took the class, and it turned out I had a knack for writing jokes, and I kind of um, and the class was about mental health and our mental health challenges. And I think folks in comics, a lot of comics, you said, have those challenges and those hard times, and so we draw from that. It's honest, it's deep, and I think that's where good comedy comes from. So that's kind of how I got there. And then after that class, people wanted to continue. And so I started teaching classes. And so I teach other folks how to do stand-up comedy, and other people with mental illness. We perform. Some of the comics that I've taught are busy with their comedy. And, for me, it was transformative because I took the hardest challenges, the deepest, darkest of my challenges, and I looked to find humor in it. And it just changed everything. And I see that same transformation happening with other people that take the class that I teach. And uh, it's fascinating how it works. It's kind of a CBT, but healing with humor, reframing everything. I used to have PTSD attacks. I'd hear a song on the radio, it would remind me of a really bad time or my dark days or regrets or guilt or whatever it was. And I'd have a panic attack. And after I took the comedy class, instead of when I got that trigger, heard that song, and it would happen 5, 6, 7 times a day for me. It was awful. But after taking the comedy class, I'd get that trigger, hear that song or whatever, and start to go back to that dark time. And then I'd say, where can I find the humor in that? And I'd look for the comedy, start to write a joke about it in my head. And, the PTSD is like almost complete history now. Um,
Wow.
it's truly amazing. So anyway, that's how I got there. That's how I got here, and I've written hundreds of jokes, and I tell jokes, and we perform. And the people that like it the most are people who live with a mental health challenge or their families.
Yeah.
I would almost argue that everybody has some kind of mental health stuff going on. I mean, even if it's just one, you want to call it stress, which Laura's the pro and stress coach over here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but also but off air, Dave and I were talking about he's in Portland, and I said, "Oh yeah, Oregon's like leading the psychedelics." And
Mm.
I have tried mushrooms one time, and when I take the mushrooms, you're supposed to set your intention. I mean, I don't know if anybody knows, but you're supposed to set your intention. And my intention was to figure out how to not be so anxious all the time. Like, what do I need to do so that I'm not anxious all the time? And the only message, I was almost disappointed with my trip, even though I had a great time, but I was almost disappointed because the only message that came to me is, this is so absurd. And I think that's kind of what you're talking about. Like when you just look at the humor in life, like how ridiculous things are sometimes, it really can shift your perspective on things.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And with the bipolar and the anxiety, the bipolar disorder, I have the highs. I go in the highs. The I'd have the hypomania, and which was great because I'd feel great, but I wasn't out of control. And then it would always go to the mania, but it wouldn't last forever. And the anxiety, the depression, during my 10 lost years, it was like constant. But over time, it's my depression, is the lows are lower, and I know it doesn't last as long, but for me, the anxiety, I mean, it was constant. It was always there. The overwhelming dread, the racing thoughts, the negative loops. I mean, it was always there. And for me, that was probably the worst. I mean, the worst part because it was always there.
And
Yeah.
I assume you tried other things before comedy.
Meditation,
Mm.
did a lot of meditation, but you know what? When I sat down to meditate, my mind was racing or in that anxiety or whatever. I would get a little bit, but my mind, I couldn't slow it down. It wouldn't slow down. So it was really hard. So I got some benefits from it, but not many. Yeah, I drank. I'd have 5 bottles of wine and drink half of it. I mean, I'd have a couple drinks and then I'd start sipping. And my wife, it was every night, and my wife, thought I had a drinking problem. But then, as I got treated for the anxiety, as the anxiety lifted, I stopped drinking. I just stopped. I didn't think about it. And what it was I drank to a certain extent to relieve the anxiety and just have some calmness, because that's what I wanted, just calmness, just peace of mind. And so I'd drink and I'd get to a certain spot and then I'd sip. Um, but again, once that was gone, I just stopped. It was truly amazing how that happened. So I didn't have a drinking problem. I had an anxiety problem.
Yes. One of my cousins, I'm so proud of him now. He's in recovery and he goes out and talks. But I remember when he first got out of rehab, he was like 25 or something, and he told me that he'd been at a bar the weekend before with his friends, and my face did something because I don't know how to monitor my face very well. And he knew something was wrong, and he just reached across the table and he put his hand on me. He goes, "I know you're worried, but alcohol wasn't my problem. It was the wrong solution." And it was like in that moment that I recognized like his mindset had changed. He understood. And I think like kind of two of the things that you've pointed out that really I think are important is like you went to the meeting and you could just be. And, we live in such a constant culture of doing more, 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 which always leaves people feeling like they're not doing enough and naturally influences stress and anxiety and some other components. And just being and like not being alone in it and like hearing that other people experience it has a really profound effect. Speaking of the same cousin, there's an annual meeting at Thanksgiving time that non-alcoholics are allowed to come to. And I always joke, speaking of comedy, that I've never wanted to be an alcoholic more than when I go to those meetings because he would always introduce me as this is my cousin. She's not one of us. And I'm like, I want to be one of you. Like, and it was such a welcoming space. And I left there feeling so empowered and connected and just uplifted from like the community support of like we all struggle, we all have had like our version of dark days, but you're not alone in this fight. And literally, I've never wanted to be an alcoholic more to the point I told him he probably shouldn't take me anymore because you might make me want to drink. Um,
Good.
but
That's great material for a joke. I mean, I'm going to go with that. I don't,
did
not
take
right
it.
now. I can't, but I'm gonna just, yeah, I've never wanted to be more. All of it when I went to a meeting to sports. I mean, that's great.
It's true.
That's
I mean,
great.
when you're introduced as she's not one of us, I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't really
Yeah.
want to be, but now I kind of want to be. And I
Yeah.
think
That's
that
great.
having that support and having that community is a really powerful thing. And the other thing that you mentioned that I really liked because, Alicia, you commented how like we all have some degree of mental health, whether we're aware of it or not, is, the need to escape. And like that's what you were just sharing about drinking is like you were just drinking enough to get to a space where you couldn't feel. And I've struggled with suicidal ideation myself before I was co-hosting with the one and only Alicia, I got to be a guest just like yourself and was able to share some of my struggles and how I tried to escape. And I think it really highlights a key component of this is like how do we talk about hard things where we weren't shown how to talk about them. And even before we kind of went live, you were mentioning how making jokes about suicide for those who have experienced it, it creates relatability. Just like any comedian who talks about food or their spouse. Like it's funny because you've lived it to a degree. But then other people who don't understand it can argue it's poor taste, but everyone has an experience. And what I've learned is the worst thing we can do is not talk about it.
That's exactly right. Exactly right. And I had my experience with uh suicide close. I sat it, with a gun in my lap and I just didn't, and for whatever reason I didn't, I don't know. But over time, through the comedy class, would you like to hear a suicide joke? It's a gentle suicide joke. You ready? All right. Let's see. How to set this up. Well, I'm just going to say it. When things were really bad in my dark days, my last years, when things were really, really bad, I decided to end it all. So I went upstairs into the bathroom and took a bunch of pills. And afterwards, I called down to my wife for help. She said there are more pills under the sink.
First of all, it's just funny to me that you called it a gentle suicide joke.
Yeah, yeah, you can. Yeah,
Gotta be warm people up to it because I mean, again, I just expressed like that degree of relatability. Obviously, Alicia, you are a therapist, so you hold that space for people often. But for listeners who don't know how to have those conversations, I understand it. And the spouse inclusion, I find even more humorous. So gentle
very
feels,
helpful.
yeah, yeah. Um,
Yeah.
and what I like is like the outlet you found, right? Like meditation, you mentioned how meditation didn't really click for you. And that's one of my pet peeves as a stress coach is so often we hear like just don't do it or just meditate. And it's like if it was that simple, we wouldn't have such an epidemic of stress on our hands. Like it's more complex and like what works for some people doesn't work for other people. So like meditation didn't work for you, but comedy did, and it gave you a way to like connect to yourself, validate your experience, but also kind of have some lightness to it. And I know, like, as stupid as this is probably going to sound, one of the ways that I've found to help soothe the moments where I feel the need to escape is actually from a new AI app called Suno that literally just generates songs. So I'll say, I'm feeling this, put it in like an alternative rock tone, and then it'll come up with a song, and I'm like, that's exactly how I'm feeling. And it's like very validating. Now, I would love to be able to play musical instruments and do that myself, but whether it's singing, coloring, joking, or having AI do some things for you, like having a way to feel seen, I think really matters.
100%, 100%. And I do work as a peer support specialist. I actually run a small nonprofit, mental health nonprofit here in the Portland area, and a lot of peer support work. I had a fella, his parents brought him in. He was an adult. He was suicidal. I mean, he was ready. He came in, he was morose. He was, just all the signs, and he was just done. And so we talked and, shared a little just that I'd, had some experience and blah, blah, blah. And then we talked some more. And then I told him that suicide joke. And he just broke out laughing. I mean, just a huge belly laugh. And his demeanor, everything changed. And so
Hmm.
we walked out into the lobby and his parents were there and he was bubbly and laughing and talking.
Right.
It was like, and then I made him promise to come back the next day, and then the next day, and then the next week, and the next week, and we got through it. So, but yeah, the comedy, and just just exactly what you said. I spent so much time in relating to what you're saying. I spent so much time pretending to be okay, and it was so exhausting. I mean, it
Yeah,
was so exhausting. I just can't, that's the imposter syndrome. But I'd see people and I'd try to be pretending to be okay, but I knew if they looked in my eyes, they'd see it, they'd see it. And because I could see it in other people, I knew they'd see it in my eyes. And I wouldn't go to the mailbox in the daytime because I didn't want to run into to a neighbor and have to talk to him and have him look into my eyes and see,
yeah.
and so I went to the mailbox at night just so I wouldn't see anybody and just have that. Because I'd be in a situation and I'd have a panic attack over and over and over, and so awful. And then the anxiety, and you talk about stress. There's a continuum. People. I mean, there's no peace of mind. There's no calmness all the time. But the stress comes, and then at a certain level it becomes anxiety, and at a certain level it's severe anxiety, and then it's panic. Um, and everybody is somewhere on that continuum, and everybody can relate to it. And it's so important to feel seen, to be listened to. Um, and with the peer support and what I do, where we're at is people come in and they can be themselves and they don't have to pretend. And um, it's a special place. It's got a great essence.
I'm
I have
sure.
yeah, I have another suicide joke if you want to hear it.
Bring them all
Yeah.
in. I
All
have no,
right.
I mean, Alicia,
Yeah, this is my last one. I taught stand-up comedy class at the Oregon State Hospital to folks who were there committed crimes, but they were there except for insanity. So I taught stand-up comedy to the criminally insane, which is great. I don't do resumes or CVs because I mean, where am I going at this point? But it's great to be able to say I taught stand-up comedy to criminally insane. But anyway, there was this one guy there, white collar crime, just he was there, obsessed about suicide. I mean, it was constant, and he was there, and any opportunity that he had, he was going to do it. And so we talked about suicide, and we were talking about this going through, and so we came up with this suicide joke. It's he knew he was getting better because when he envisioned himself jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge, he was wearing a floaty. I know, I know.
I like that
Yeah.
one.
Yeah. And so you can, I mean, when you can talk about suicide and bring in some humor, it, you know, makes it so you can talk about it. So, you can realize you're not alone. And if through the humor one can, when that suicidal ideation comes or that urge comes, if at that point their mind goes to the jokes that I told, or a joke that we've written for them, or that they worked on. So if their mind goes from that suicidal ideation to where can I find the humor in that, um, you know, I mean uh, not to be overly dramatic, but it saves lives.
It literally saves lives. I don't think that's over dramatic at all.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm curious if through doing this work you've noticed any like consistency in characteristics or people who connect more with humor as a kind of preferred outlet, or like meditation didn't work, but humor did. Like, have you noticed any of that through the work you've done?
Pretty much everybody connects with the humor.
I was
And
gonna
I
say, it tends
find,
to happen.
yeah, I know, I know. I remember, I mean, like I said, I went through my dark days, and I didn't laugh for years and years and years. And then I remember when I did laugh, I mean, a real belly laugh. And I just remember the feeling and whatnot. And I realized that it had been years since that happened. But with the people and the folks with mental health challenges, when they find out they're talking to other people who've been there, the humor comes up. It just organically comes up. There's talk, and it bothers me, and maybe it's going to strike you differently, but people here, I've gotten calls and from behavioral health people about, okay, what do you think about the word crazy? Should we say the word? Should we get rid of it? Should we stop saying the word crazy? And to me, that's crazy. They say it's stigmatizing, or it's talking to, and of all the people I work with, I mean, for us, crazy is, I mean, we know what crazy is. We don't get offended when we hear that the weather's crazy or the traffic's crazy or whatever. And when we're in the group or talking or whatever, and we know what crazy is. We talk about when we were crazy, what we did, and some of the crazy stuff about what we did when we were actually crazy. And we laugh, we talk, we relate. It's very healthy. So, the people with the mental health challenges, when they're in a group or when they're at peace, when they're calm, when they don't have to pretend, there's lots of humor. And the only people that I've found that have been challenged in taking the class or in with the humor are the people that take things literally or are very literal. So, will come up like, with the pun, setup, like some setup of, I'm on my way to the grocery store, blah, 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 so that was real because all good humor is based in reality. And the setup is, okay, the reality. Um, and then the humor, the punchline is the creative part. So the people that have the biggest problems or challenges are the ones who, okay, going to the grocery store, that's real. And then in the grocery store, I fell down, bumped my head, and all of a sudden I wasn't crazy anymore. And they'll say, that was not bad for just coming up with that. Um, and they'll say, but that's not what happened. I mean, but that didn't happen. And I'm
Ah,
so they're taking it literally, and
mhm.
it's if we can get beyond that, then they can be comfortable with the humor. But
Yeah,
sometimes that's the biggest challenge to get beyond that. That's someone who is very literal, because it's comedy is an art.
yeah.
Writing jokes, it's an art. There's there are rules to comedy, or there, and it's an art, and then the timing, and then telling the jokes and performing, it's an art. When we have a comedy show, and I'll MC and do some comedy, and then other folks that are taking the mental health class will perform. And
Hmm.
we sold out Healing Comedy Club here. 285 people came, and it was There were eight of us, and we did our show. And the folks come out, and sometimes when people take the class, they'll say, "Okay, I'm going to take the class. I want to take the class. I want to do the humor part, but I'm never going to perform." And I say, "Okay, that's great. That's fine." But at the end of the class, they love their jokes, and the
Mm,
jokes were always laugh out loud funny, the ones we come up with and settle on. And so they want to share that joke. So they get up on stage and to see them tell the jokes. And these are people, some of them with severe mental illness.
Yeah.
Um, and they get up and they tell their jokes and they share their story, and we tell our story one joke at a time.
mm.
It's amazing, rewarding, it's inspirational, um, it's just truly amazing. It'd be nice to be able to take the show on the road, but since there are eight of us, it's like, okay, eight of us are going to fly to Tampa and, you know, stay in
We'll come.
hotels. And
We'll watch.
Yeah, I'll be there.
yeah, I know we always have an audience. It's like, how do you get eight people across the country? So anyway, but we need a sponsor, maybe one of the I don't maybe one of the drug companies will sponsor us. That would be interesting. We could tell drug company jokes. We could
Oh my
we
God.
could tear them apart on stage.
Yeah, that would be hilarious if you could
Yeah.
actually get them to be the ones who actually sponsor
Oh
you.
my God.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, and then rip them and hopefully they'd have a sense of humor. So yeah.
Yes.
I have I talked about the ups and downs, the bipolar, the mania, and then the depression. And over the years, I never know. I didn't know who was going to wake up in the morning. I just didn't know which me was going to wake up. But I finally figured out how to tell if I was depressed or if I was manic. When I was depressed, um, I spent all my time just trying to get out of bed. And when I was manic, I spent all my time trying to get my wife into bed.
Very true. Very telling
Yeah,
stuff.
you're
It
very
is, isn't it?
accurate. Yeah.
Yeah, it is accurate because with the mania, the hypomania, I mean, sexual ideation, I don't know, it's just there. It's just there, which is, part of the mania of the risk taking and all that. So
So
anyway,
It's,
recognizing desire has a strong relationship in understanding kind of your mental state.
yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
truly does, truly
Not as
does.
funny, but
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's yeah, not as funny. Some things just aren't funny. There are some places we don't go, but um, just in the classes, it's interesting. We go to these different places, people talk, and we really open up. And, we talk about our darkest times and our hardest days and things we'd never share with anybody. Sometimes I mean, we wouldn't share with family. Those are the things that are inside me that are inside people that you just don't share. Um,
I think,
but in the classes we go there, but in the shows and whatnot, we don't go to those dark, dark, dark places. I guess Suicide Story, but
yeah,
we don't
right.
go to
After
our
I make a
personal
suicide
dark.
joke.
Yeah, yeah,
I think it's a sign of talent though when people can go to those places you're not supposed to and it's still funny.
yeah, art, you
yeah.
know?
It is, and it's being edgy, going to those places. And I've got jokes. Sometimes it'll strike me, I'll sit down and I'll write jokes. And like in a half an hour, I'll come up with 12 jokes. It just when I'm inspired. And they're not mental health jokes anymore. I'll just start writing jokes and some of them are, really edgy and I like it. I like those jokes. I pushing the boundaries just a bit and not punching down, not none of that, but being that our humor, the shows, the reviews have been that, it's intelligent, it's moving, and it's inspirational. And the part I like about that is that it's intelligent, it's smart humor.
Mhm.
It's not easy laughs. It's not humor or attempted humor, whatever it is to get applause. It's none of that's kind of stuff. It's just laugh out loud, funny stuff that, again, we tell our stories.
Hmm.
So yeah, edgy, edgy. I'm thinking of if there's one, the thing is the internet lives on forever. So um,
That's
Interesting.
true.
Yeah.
I'm
I read a
curious.
book
Oh, go
once called You're Not Listening. Sorry. Um, and they talked about, like, it was a really good book about understanding like the importance of listening. And one of the components, my favorite part of the book, was about including humor to help teams, specifically improv, to help teams learn to communicate better. And, as I've been listening to you, what I love about your whole approach to it is like, it isn't dumb. It is actually quite smart. You're creating belonging. You're allowing people to be. You're making light of really hard situations while still helping people feel seen and heard. And like that is what it's about. So, what a beautiful, epic way to like heal so much challenges. Like, this is so cool that you do this.
yeah, and who knew? I mean, who knew this was where I was going to end up? I know you guys have talked about purpose on your show, and uh, I mean, who knew? You know, but here it is, and to have the comedy and the mental health comedy do those things that you just said and make such a difference in people's lives and in the audience, the folks making a difference, shattering a stigma, helping people see us as real people and not as scary or dangerous or incapable. Um, because we're not. I mean, we're not this thing, about the word crazy. I mean, to think that we're so fragile that we can't hear a word. We can't hear a word and deal with that. That's stigmatizing and in my mind that's the worst kind of ableism because we don't need taken care of. We don't. We need to be treated just like regular people. We don't need to be protected. Um, we
Mm.
just need to be treated with respect and listened to. And some people are in different places and need more support and than others. And we can advocate for people and we can help them find services and we can do those things. But we don't need to have anybody, fix us. That term fix us, um, because we are. I think it was Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and I can't remember the whole quote, but essentially she said, um, people um, caring, people that make a difference, are not born, they're made.
Mm.
And so we live, I wish I could remember it better than that, but, um, our whole life makes us who we are. So
Yeah.
I've got another joke if you guys have time to hear it.
Hit
yes.
us.
You good for it? Okay. With my mental illness, I take medication to help with it. And one of the meds I take is notorious for weight gain. And so when I started taking it, true to form, I gained 30 pounds. And finally, I decided to do something about it. So I joined a fitness club. And I went to the fitness club and I started doing the treadmill. And I realized the treadmill was a perfect exercise for someone with a mental illness because you do the same thing over and over and over again, and you never get anywhere. And then the other day, I was working out on the treadmill, and the guy next to me looked over and he said, "You're not going very fast." I said, "That's okay. My mind's racing."
Always.
Set up. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I know. So that's medication, weight gain, physical, blah, 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 and humor to boot. So.
All fun.
I'm
Yeah.
curious how you got through that period that you were talking about with the PTSD and the severe panic attacks. Like,
Mm.
what was there a specific joke? Like, how did you find the humor in that? Because as a therapist, I work with people who fight panic on a regular basis, and I would think that humor is the last thing they're able to find in those situations. So curious how you did that.
Yeah. You, it didn't, I mean, my panic attacks were awful. I mean, it would take me days to recover. I'd be talking, and I never knew when they were going to come on. And, it could be a small, stressful situation or something bigger, but I'd start to sweat. And as soon as I started to sweat, it got worse. And the sweat would pour down my face and soak my collar and soak my armpits. And my eyes would, my eyesight would go fuzzy and all these things. And it was everything I could do just not to run away and escape. Um, uh, when it took, I don't know what one point, it took me finding the humor first to
Mm.
be able then to look at it and say, okay, where can I find the humor in that? It was awful. I don't know, I think talking about it and then just at a certain point, I think with you guys, I mean, if there's anything I could say is, don't necessarily, you can't make light of it, but at the same time, if there's some way to, in a session or in a process to say, where can we find, is there some humor in any of these situations? Or if somebody's talking about a specific incident situation, maybe there's an opportunity to look for some humor in it. And once you can get to that place, once the person can get to the place where when it's happening, they can say, where can I find the humor in it? Or afterwards, where can I find the humor in that experience? That's when it makes a difference.
Where did you find the humor though? Were you like, oh, it's hilarious to be a sweaty disaster?
I know it's I mean, and that's one of the hardest places. I'd go into a bathroom, like going to an event, a sporting event or whatever. I go into a bathroom at halftime and I'd have to go pee and I'd go, if anybody else was in there, I just couldn't. Then I'd start to sweat and I'd start to have a panic attack, but because here I was and, you know, um, I thought everybody was staring at me. I mean, all of those things that happen with a panic attack. And so I'd go out, I'd have to leave the bathroom, wait till it was empty, sometimes 5 minutes, sometimes half an hour, and then go in. And then a couple weeks ago, my wife and I went to a movie, and afterwards I went into the restroom and there were people in there, and I went up to the urinal and I went. And at that moment, I realized how far I'd come. So I stepped back from the urinal and I went,
Everyone's
everybody
like,
in
what's
the
up with this
bathroom
guy?
looked at me like I was crazy. I said, no, not anymore. I know I didn't tell you guys that was a joke coming. So, but
But
anyway,
you're just funny.
it's
It
the
makes
best
it
kind.
easy.
That's the best kind. So,
What
yeah.
what role do you feel like, I guess, acceptance plays in finding your humor? Like, with what is it with AA? Like the first rule is like acknowledging and admitting like you're an alcoholic. So, can you shed some light on that?
Yeah, I think, and one of the things that I try to message folks is, acceptance without resignation. So I went through the stages of grief. Um, Took me years and years and years. I'd go, like I said, successful businessman, and then, 2 years later, I'm riding the bus to the grocery store to pick up, you know, one bag of groceries because that's all you get transport on the bus. I mean, just, little things like that. And I'd look at people in the bus or look at people at, other places. Like when I was in the psych unit, I looked around and I said, that's not me.
Beautiful.
That's not me. That's not me. And so went through that. And then the anger, I mean, the mental health, and it's still, pretty much mostly it just pissed me off. It was like, just pissed me off. And then I got to the point where, okay, that is me.
Mm.
And it's the name of my books, OMG, that's me. It's like, that is me. And So I accepted the fact that I have the mental illness, that I have these challenges. At the same time, it's really, I think, important that you can have acceptance without resignation. You can have acceptance that I can accept that I live with a mental illness and I've got challenges and struggles and there's things that I can't do. But I don't get stuck. I'm not resigned to, okay, the low point is the way it's going to be, and I don't stop trying. Even through those 10 years and the homeless years, I kept trying and failing and having panic attacks and all those things, and then trying again. And just the simplest of small things were overwhelming, but I'd try. So I think acceptance, it comes over time. If you can, if one doesn't resign themselves to being at the worst spot in their life, then I think acceptance will come. It takes time, and that's the other thing we talked about suicide.
Mm.
Um, and suicide for anybody that's listening, or for you guys, suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem.
Yes, it is.
Things get better, things change. If things could get better for me and I could evolve, things do get better. And that's the other, things don't get better no matter how low, how dark, there is hope and things do get better. And they may not be great, and you're not going to go back to where you were when before, but leading a full life and being able to do things and maybe it's just going to the mailbox in the daytime. You know,
Oh,
I used to watch the cooking channel because I was doing something without doing something. There was no stress. I could just watch it. And sometimes, I didn't cook any of the recipes, but I at least learned what spices go where. And so I'd watch the cooking channel, and I could do that, and that got me out of my head. Um, so yes, and I write about that in the books. The other thing I did, speaking of the OMG, that's me, I blog for bphope.com,
mm.
and BP is bipolar, but it's bphope.com. And the posts have been read by over 1 million people. And the most common comment is, OMG, that's me. You're telling my story. I don't feel so alone now.
Yeah.
And so I took the best of those posts and compiled them in the book, self-published, and sold over 20,000 copies. And you guys know, if you self-publish, you sell maybe 50 copies to family and friends, and you know, say I published a book, and yeah. But anyway, somehow, for some reason, whatever, it caught on and has sold 20,000 copies so far. And now the audiobook is outselling the paperback. And the second book, OMG, That's Me 3, is about the stand-up comedy, the people, and the transformation that happened with them. And the book is great, but the audio book is amazing because we were able to splice in their live act. So
Oh,
them telling jokes on
that's super
stage
cool.
with with the narration, and it really is, it's been described as brilliant. I'm terrible at promoting. This is as promotional as I get, is just mentioning it. I've never promoted. I've had a hard time because um, I've got to do things for the right reason, and if the reason I'm doing something is to sell books, I can't do that. So I've got to figure out how it can be okay for me to promote. And
That,
I haven't got very good at that yet. But anyway, those are the two books. If anybody wants to know what it's truly like to live with a mental illness, it's OMG, That's Me. That's the one. That's the one. People read it and it's like, I had no idea other people are going through this. I don't feel so alone, and I'm okay. And then to get the uplifted inspiration, OMG, That's Me 3, and you'll end up being inspired and laughing through it, and getting to know folks who live with mental illness that have found the humor in their stories. and again, tell their story one joke at a time.
I
Do
love
you do any work with the military?
I need to. I haven't. And they're so, you know, there are so many audiences. I think it would be awesome to, with the recovery community, alcohol or drug and I mean, what an awesome group. I mean, what material there is and I mean, these are people that are in like the recovery point where they can really find the humor and really laugh and really have a good time. I'd like to do that. Therapists, providers. I think that learning and doing a stand-up comedy class with therapists, it would do two things. It's going to help folks in their work, but it's also going to help folks, just well, I guess again, help folks with their work and understanding what it's like to live with mental illness. The military, I that's a huge, I mean, if just to do a few classes and reach, 12, 15 people doing
Yeah.
that have the PTSD going on or the challenges and help them heal. I know I've seen it happen with, people with serious mental illness and people not so, with people with anxiety disorders to bipolar and severe autism. I mean, if I we had one fellow severely autistic, and his dad said, can he join the class?" And I said, "Sure." And he came in and he sat on a couch away from the table where we were sitting around the table, and he didn't say anything. He did that for two classes. Third class, he was sitting on the couch, and we were talking, and he popped off with something totally unrelated. And thanks for that. That was great. And then we kept, going with the class. And then the next class, he was sitting at the table, and pretty soon he was writing jokes. And his parents said then he performed, and uh, parents and family and friends had tears in their eyes. They never ever thought they'd, you
Yeah.
know, see him uh, do what he did, and he's in the book, and it's an amazing story. There's so many stories like that. I could, you know, uh, Michael came and his mom brought him. He was about 25, and he whispered. He couldn't talk above a whisper, so he just whispered. And so over time, he started to talk a little louder, and we came up with jokes, and he liked the jokes. He loved just jokes. And then I had him go home and practice and go into the bathroom and, tell his jokes as loud as he could. And I told him if it's too loud, it's just right. And then I had the next week him going to the garage and yelling it. And he was yelling his jokes. And I said, if you think you're crazy, it's just right. And he
Mm.
got up and performed, and he was outgoing, and he was loud, and it's just, I mean, the impact. I mean, the stories are just amazing. It changed my life. I see that same change, that same transformation happening in other people's lives. I wish I could clone myself and do the military, do you
Well,
know, uh,
sponsorship.
criminals. Anything you guys, if you guys get some suggestions or any ideas, let me know. You guys know probably better than I do where the comedy and learning the humor can make the biggest difference.
I think
And it's a labor of love.
yes, I love it so much. And my dad was a really funny person and he loved comedy and he always was making jokes. It was hard to have a serious conversation with him, and sometimes it was annoying because I'm like, "Dad, I just need you to talk to me right now." But I think it was so meaningful because now, like, my whole family is hilarious, and my sisters are so funny, and um, I just appreciate humor so much, and I'm almost jealous of where you're at now because you just get to like have SNL with your friends like all the time.
And
That's
that's work.
that
Yeah, and
sounds
that's
so
work. Yeah, yeah. And for me, it is work. I mean, if I've got 8 people in the class, we're coming up with, 10 to 12 jokes that are laugh out loud, phony, stage-worthy jokes. And it takes a lot of creative energy. And then being between the classes, I'm working on the jokes and massaging and doing the wording. And one of the keys to humor and jokes is to use as few words as possible to get it out. An extra word here or an extra word there just takes it out. And I spent years trying to make, and I still try to edit and try to make my jokes, um, you know, um, tighter and fewer words. But I forgot where I was going, so
Perfect.
uh, I should make a joke about that. But anyway, yeah, yeah, you're talking about your dad and the humor and the SNL, and it is a lot of work. It's a lot of creativity. But it's rewarding and it's fun. And you talked about mushrooms in Portland and the drugs, and after they legalized marijuana in Oregon, we got a new airline. It's called Air Cannabis. They don't they don't charge you by how far you go, but by how high you get.
Ooh, that would be entertaining. What type of snacks do they have on board?
Yeah, exactly. I know that's the next place to go, but you know what? It's expected, and it's expected doesn't work. I don't like expected. It's got to be creative. It's got to be unique. It's got to be something unexpected. So, if you go to the snacks on board and edibles and all that kind of stuff, it's too easy. So I haven't figured out a second and a third punchline to it. But anyway, and I don't tell it.
Good
It's just
start.
one of those that's out there. There's jokes that are out there. I have one other quick one. I know we're running close to on time, but this is one that's great for kids. Do you know what the difference is between a Florida squirrel and an Oregon squirrel? The accent. I know. I know.
I think I just swallowed my own spit.
Oh,
There's another joke. So anyway, yeah, and almost all the classes I've done have been in person, but I think doing, um, Zoom works. So I'm going to do more via Zoom.
Yeah, I think that's great.
You got to keep it to, you can't have too many people, but that's a way to reach people in uh, other areas and like military and some of the different things. So,
all right.
but
Well,
anyway,
we'll stay in touch with you to find out exactly all the things that you get into.
yeah,
Um,
Absolutely.
please do,
much
please do.
for being
And
with us today.
if anybody wants to reach out to me, they can do it on Facebook, message me on Facebook, I check, or on LinkedIn, I check. And I always respond. So if anybody wants to reach out, they can, and I'll be happy to get back. And if you guys want to talk about this off, line or out of episode, or if you've got ideas, or if you want to spend a little time creating some jokes on your own with me, be happy to spend a little time and find some humor in your stories.
I love that.
Comedy special coming up.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
All right, Dave. Well, thank you so much. We have to roll for now, but we are so grateful to have been able to talk to you today, and we'll be in touch.
Okay, that's
Absolutely.
great.
Thank
Hey,
you.
yeah, thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
All
Bye-bye.
right.